This is a sad day for our country. The Supreme Court just passed a ruling today saying that our government can collude with big tech companies to censor the free speech of Americans.
Recognize that the law allows Facebook, Twitter, and other private companies to moderate content on their platforms. And I support the right of governments to communicate with the public, including to dispute inaccurate information. But government officials have been caught repeatedly pushing social media platforms to censor disfavored users and content. Often these acts of censorship threaten the legal protection social media companies need to exist, Section 230.
So the Supreme Court striking down today a lower court ruling that found the Biden White House and other federal agencies likely violated the First Amendment by pressuring social media companies to censor or remove posts and accounts they didn't agree with. Stanford Medical School professor Dr. Jay Bhattacharya was part of that lawsuit and learned via the Twitter files that Matt Taibbi and others put out there that his account had been slapped with a, quote, trends blacklist label for daring to counter Dr. Fauci and others about what he saw as harmful COVID-era lockdowns. Dr. Bhattacharya joins me now. Great to have you with us today, Doctor. And, we all followed very closely your prescriptions during COVID, which were very different than the lockdowns that were instituted all around us. And you sought to get your Great Barrington Proclamation out there and the information that you had about the harmful effects of all these lockdowns. And then you got slammed with this trends blacklist that took you down. What is your reaction to this decision by the Supreme Court today, which was not in your favor, clearly?
Yeah, so we lost 6-3. The reasoning that the Supreme Court used was that we lack standing. Mm-hmm. That's a very, very important set of reasoning, because what it says is that in order for the First Amendment to work, you have to prove that the government went to the social media companies and said, censor Jay. What it allows then the government to do is to go to social media companies and say, censor the people saying that closing schools harm children. Censor people that say that there is immunity after COVID recovery. Censor people that say that there are people that were vaccine injured, right? And then the government can just say, do that, so they can threaten the social media companies. And apparently the Supreme Court thinks that that is consistent with the American First Amendment. Essentially, in effect, the First Amendment is a dead letter, because the Supreme Court has said that there's no one who has standing unless they're specifically called out to stop them from violating the First Amendment via proxies, that is via the social media companies.
So Thomas, Alito, and Gorsuch were among the dissent, and the majority opinion was written by Justice Amy Coney Barrett, and she says what you just said. The plaintiffs rely on allegations of past government censorship as evidence that future censorship is likely, but they fail, by and large, to link their past social restrictions to the defendant's communications and platforms. I understand, that you disagree with that. And I would just remind everybody about the Twitter back and forth. We can put some of these up. But with the government and Twitter basically saying, we're concerned about these. We'd like you to take them down. And then the response was, handled. So this weekly meetings that we heard about. What are your concerns about this decision? And do you think it can be rectified in the future?
So the government essentially acted like like mob bosses. That's exactly what the appeals court said. They likened it to Al Capone, threatening the social media companies' very existence if they didn't comply with the censorship orders. They were not acting voluntarily. They were acting under duress by government. The government essentially acted to protect itself from criticism, valid criticism about its own misinformation. And it did it silently behind the scenes. The dissent in this was actually quite sensible. Essentially what it says is this is a green light for the government to censor. And the government will take it that way because there's no standing for people to sue and say, look, you're not allowed to censor. The First Amendment no longer has a viable presence in the courts of this nation under this ruling. And if you can't use past violations of the First Amendment as evidence of potential future violations, what could you use? It doesn't make any sense. The reasoning of the court here makes literally no sense. It's saying like, look, they did censor me in the past, but who knows if they will in the future? And we shouldn't enjoin them from stopping from essentially abiding by the First Amendment in the future. It's a very disheartening day for this country.
Yeah, you wrote a lot of your thoughts on COVID in the Wall Street Journal and other places, and people got to read them. But when they found their way onto Twitter and other social media accounts, they were slapped with this label. And Dr. Fauci says, show me a school that I shut down. I never told a school to shut down. And now we see the just continuing damage on our children across this country as a result of these actions, which I know you were very much against. Doctor, thank you. Yeah, go ahead. Final thought?
I mean, if we had the First Amendment, we would have had better policy. First, the First Amendment protects the health of Americans, and it's a sad day that we don't have that in this country right now.
Mark this day, because this day is the death of the First Amendment in the United States of America.